Happy September 4th to you. I'm BR Schultz, SP 500. Thank you for joining me. We are 60 months away from when I believe that the Great Depression will kick off, the Great Depression window in the least. And so today this slide is the only slide. And so just wanted to share with you my targets. This is from a monthly macro view. And so I found interesting is that the first target the markets have it stalled out at. And then I think we hit these following targets. They're all about 700 points apart, and then all of a sudden, then you have a 2,100 point run, if you will, into the 10.5, and I think that's where you get into that blow off top, that feeling that the train has left the station. And that's when everyone kind of gets in that euphoric mode, is when you have this triple multiplier between 8.5 and 10.5. I think that's what you're seeing in gold right now. The gold and silver miners, they're kind of hitting that euphoric state. And so basically, I've developed a method for looking at the structure of pricing. And it's kind of a complex formula, but yet it's very simplistic. It's very fifth grade, but it has quite a few nuances to it. But it is repeatable, obviously, because I took the output from Excel, so I have it a simple calculator, if you will. So I just punch in the structure that I see for the pricing, and then it spits out the targets. So I think at the end of 2030, you will see one of these targets being fulfilled, and then we have the Great Depression. The whole market collapses after that, and obviously I do think it'll be about that 10.3 to 10.5 area, and then we could see that massive drop in markets into early 2034. But I figured I should do one simple slide for the record, just so that my pricing is all documented. I have tried this on a number of things. I've tried this on 4 hours, daily, monthly, on a number of S&P 500 timeframes, and it seems to hit again and again and again. Not every one, obviously. You don't get the full extension the whole time, but the system can comprehend what a full extension looks like, right? On the 4 hour, when you have a very bullish market, a sell-off may only hit the second target. So the theory works both for projecting upward movement as well as downward movement. So the structure of the market, as well as how the systematic calculation is created. Slurp of coffee there. Is simply, you can use it both ways. So, and I guess that's the best I can put it. But these are my targets for late 2030. And so I think that we would hit a roughly 10.3 to 10.5, and then after that, lights out. Again, this is a monthly scale, so the monthly, as you might imagine, will stay in place despite what happens on the daily scale, right? Why do I say that? Because sometimes if you create targets off of the daily, and it reaches maybe like the second target level, right, and then you have a new structure set up, you could say, well, you got to recalculate, blah, blah, blah. But on a monthly scale, right, the structure is not going to be reset unless we have some huge collapse or crash in the market. I don't think that you would have a complete reset, if you will, of the calculation, right? So what I'm saying is the extensions would stay in place on a monthly scale. And that's basically how I look at crypto, I guess. Now I'm learning to try this method on crypto and other stocks, and like the XAU index, looking at the macro monthly view because despite what happens on a daily, you could have corrections or things of that nature, right? Basically, your calculation is based on structure. So if the structure shows up again and again, you could keep making new calculations, right? But on a monthly scale, it's hard to create those structures because it takes so stinking long, right, for monthly candles to finish out and things of that nature. So the calculation does not change as quickly, right? It could take a couple, 2-3 years before you reach whichever target is going to create the expiration of the markets or the termination of pricing. And so the monthly scale obviously would be the best to utilize in any type of calculation that you're going to use macro extensions, or whether it's downward or higher. And so I thought this would be a good example of how I see the market terminating at the end of 2030. Maybe it's Christmas time or New Year's Eve of 2030 that we hit the 10.5 mark, or we just squeak above 10.3 right around New Year's Eve 2030, or maybe January 1st of 2031, right? But then the market, I believe, the structure on the monthly level would structure itself as to create some type of measurement lower. And then at that time, I can obviously see if that structure exists for the pricing calculation on the monthly scale. And then I would be able to provide downward targets, right? Which is, I enjoy this, obviously, this target system. And I obviously did some rounding on it. I rounded to a -2 spaces, so it pulled it to the first two digits, so 6, 5, 7, 2, 7, 7, 7, 8, 5, 10, 5. So the last two digits of each one of these numbers is 0, obviously, so that's why I did the rounding, right? And that's usually what the investment banks do. They do the rounding. They don't give you like a specific exact number. And though I started doing that on my first slides or whatever, for the daily scale, I decided, why not just throw out those round lot estimates for the final peak in markets for 2030. So this is part 30 of my Great Depression series. And obviously, I believe that the Federal Reserve is largely responsible, and the Treasury is largely responsible for the collapse of markets that's coming. And then obviously, if you're the billionaires of the world, the globalists, would try to definitely even exacerbate the problems, help bring in the illegal immigrants to spend all the Social Security on, and therefore you basically bankrupt a nation into 2030, and then it's left with nothing but dire straits, right? And then you have to yield your power, right? You have nothing to sell, you have no assets, so then you have to yield your power to someone else, to another nation, to a larger financial institution, or recreate your own financial system, which obviously usually gets integrated with the other nation's systems. And that was kind of the mousetrap game that they were playing with America, and they were hoping that they would be able to destabilize America after the height of the market in late 2030. That was the goal, it would seem, as the Roaring Twenties would unfold. And then basically with the giant drop in markets from 2031 through 2033 into early 2034, basically wiping out 17 to 34% of the middle class. Obviously, it could be 34 up front, right? And then it could, then by the end of a couple years later, it could, the half of that number could re-enter the workforce, where, and then the other half would be in very dire straits. But from 2031 through 2034 or 2033, you could see up to a third of the workforce being without jobs. So it's it's like the late 90s all over again. If you live through that, I'm in my 40s, so I lived through the 90s. I remember when internet came out, email came out. It was a big thing, right? And we're all going to have shorter work days, and it was going to solve all the world's problems, having technology. and basically they offshored all the jobs, and Newt Gingrich, thought he was just the greatest guy ever to negotiate the offshoring of America's jobs, and the Republican Party. Horrible stain on them, right? A bunch of greedy boogers. And my older brother, had worked at a cabinet manufacturer when I was in high school, and I remember how happy he was every day when he came home from high school in the summertime, being beat, working a hard day, but making good money. And then I remember NAFTA wiping out all that job, and it's really done a toll on him. So it's unfortunate that that's what Newt Gingrich and the Republicans at the time, and very few Democrats, I'll give them that, in the 90s, they really destroyed America. So it's very interesting now that President Trump seems to be renegotiating the whole game, right, and bringing jobs back to America. So it's something that I never thought I'd see in my lifetime, honestly. I didn't really understand the impact, obviously, back in high school, but nowadays, wow, how destructive that was, and how foolish these men were, right, to sell out our nation. And then Bill Clinton obviously signed off on it. It was horrible on his part as well. So yeah, it's good to see America back in strength and in strength mode. So hopefully, not only is there a manufacturing revival in America, but hopefully there's a spiritual revival around the world as well. So that would be awesome. Yeah. So, and then obviously I'm a big advocate for George Mueller's book, The Release the Power of Prayer. George Mueller lived back in the I think it was 1800s, and he built 5 orphanages. He oversaw 10,000 orphans in his lifetime. The average lifespan of that time was, I think, around 40, and he lived to be 80 or 90. So he actually doubled the average lifespan of the day. And he was a man that was fully committed to prayer for all of his needs. He never asked anyone for money to fund the orphanages, believe it or not. And he died penniless. He truly lived out everything that he believed in. God answered prayers in huge ways in his life. So that's, after reading that book in one of the darkest times in my life, very dark time in my life, going through a horrible divorce, and being threatened with never being able to see my kids again, because that's just how divorce goes. Most of us know those things. It gets pretty ugly. And pleading with my ex to come back and fix things, but she decided she wanted to leave for an old boyfriend from high school. Yeah, at that time I was destroyed, and broken, and it was the end of the world for me. So the Lord was very merciful to me. In that book, I'm not a reader by any means. I'm a data guy, and that book changed my life. It really did. It played a huge impact on my prayer life and trusting God much more than I ever had before. And I will say this: it usually takes the Lord to work in my heart, I guess, 8 to 10 months before I see an answer to prayer many times. So I'm always talking with my wife and saying, well, if I want to see the Lord answer that prayer, I better start praying now, right? Better start praying yesterday or today, right? Because I've got to wait almost a year for the Lord to work in my life, I guess, or work in my heart, so that I can be prepared to receive an answer to prayer. And just recently, like I think I shared earlier, another video, the Lord provided a 2004 or 5 Cadillac Escalade black, the ones that were in like Transformers and stuff back in the day. The FBI the drive around in the movies. It was a blessing. It really is. I never thought I would be driving around a Cadillac, because I'm pretty much own my car kind of guy, and I like to run them into the ground. And so when you have a big family, you never know how you're going to fit all your kids in a car, especially with car prices going through the roof nowadays. I didn't see how that would even be possible. So I was praying that the Lord would provide a a high-end, high-class vehicle for a low cost, a low fixing cost, and that would be in good running condition. And then I got that Cadillac, that black Cadillac Escalade. It's got a little bit of rust, but the inside, as you know, those Cadillacs are just luxurious. It drives really well. It's got, there's always glitches with older vehicles, but I'm elated. That was a huge answer to prayer. And the property I own, obviously, is a few acres, and so for every year I prayed in my condo, it seemed the Lord provided an acre of land when He answered the prayer. So that's why I kind of say it takes 8 to 10 months sometimes. But yeah, we prayed for a number of years for a house back after COVID, in a time where home prices had shot to the moon, and the Lord really provided this house and this property as a direct answer to prayer, and we got it for a very low cost. Had to put a lot of work in myself, and that's usually what answers to prayer mean for me, is I have to put a lot of work in myself. But yeah, that was a blessing as well. So those are huge answers to prayer in my life. And then obviously I got remarried. That was a huge answer to prayer after 2 years of horrible divorce and dark time in my life. I didn't think I'd have any more kids. I thought I was going to be die a lonely man. And the Lord has more than doubled the number of kids I had in my first marriage, much like Job. So the answers to prayer really mean a lot, right? When you put yourself greatly at God's mercy, that's when you can see the great mercy of God. And that's kind of my life's quote. After I read George Mueller's book, that's the quote that I've kind of developed on my own. If you want to see great mercy from God, then one must put themselves greatly at God's mercy. That is the quote. That's kind of my life quote that I created out of that, reading that George Mueller book, and then obviously being put greatly at God's mercy in a number of times in my life has taught me to depend more on Him, right? We'd always like to say that we depend fully on God, but our human nature gets in the way all too often, and so our emotions get bent out of shape, yada, yada, yada. And having quite a few kids, it can get loud sometimes trying to get your kids to listen. So I don't pretend that I'm anywhere near perfect, actually. So like Jesus said, it's not the healthy that need a physician, but it's the sick, right? So it's not those that think that they're righteous and don't need Jesus Christ. It's those that see themselves as a disgusting, wretched sinner, like the author of Amazing Grace, and realize how much they need the forgiveness of God through the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ and His blood upon their lives to forgive them of their sins. Because, I know I'm very much a wretched sinner, and so that's why I fully depend upon God through faith in Jesus Christ and the blood that He spilt on the cross for my sins and for the world's. So that is the full progression of life so far in my faith journey. And then to top it off, the cherry on the cake right now is after 20 years of kind of getting into markets. After 20 years of getting into markets, it took 20 years to develop this pricing calculation that you're seeing on your screen today. And so, so that's been obviously a prayer journey for 20 years, asking God for help in understanding how pricing works in markets. I've never understood pricing. It's only been since about 2022 that I developed those shorter term models that you will see every now and then for the purple wave, and it had huge accuracy in 2022. Some of you might remember that. And then obviously I wipe out, get my butt kicked, and then I have to pick myself back up and try to learn where I made my mistakes. But it took me 20 years to get the point here where I can develop a price structure off of the monthly pricing movement on the S&P 500 in the form of candles. So with that said, this is a 20-minute video. So I've shared a little bit about my heart, my life, but most pointedly to the markets, I've shared with you where I believe that the final peak could rest at the end of 2030. This is how I get to my 10.3 to 10.5 calculation. I believe that the original target was like 10.340. So this kind of encompasses this little 10.3 to 10.5 window. So that's where I think we're headed. And again, it's all these, for some reason, the calculation is placing all these milestones about 700 points apart in the market. And then the last stretch is a 7 times 3 multiplier up to 10.5. So with that said, that's kind of been the progression of my stock market timing journey. I took an interest back in early around 2002, 2003, and then I started studying formulas and things of that nature, mathematics of indicators, things and that's how I started building my own. And 2009, 2010, I started building my own models. Yeah, so it's been about 15 years building models and about 20 years taking an interest in markets. So that's my story. If you want to, if you listen this long and you hopefully are interested in my work and like it, I've created a GoFundMe that is going to be open through the end of 2034. So you can not only watch the market, but you can watch the GoFundMe too. And if you, at the end of 2030, you're impressed and you see that we've hit one of these targets and you want to donate to my work, yeah, that'd be awesome. And my target for the end of 2034 is $777,000. So almost $800,000 is my 10-year goal, $750,000. So who knows? You might see some big fish in there someday. I don't know. I might fail miserably too. I have to completely understand that could be the case. But in this current day, you never know what moment is going to define where something could take a huge change for the better, right, in our lives. So yeah. So anyways, I think that high risk window for the Great Depression window should occur from 2031 through 2033, with the tail end being in early to mid 2034. Thank you so much for watching. I'm B.R. Schultz. Till SP500. Until next time, take care. Again, this is just a snippet of the GoFundMe page. I didn't want you to forget that, so thank you. And please bookmark it, whatever, and watch it over the next decade or into late 2034. Thank you so much.